Supreme Court victory. A Catholic foster care agency wins its case. We have reaction. Bishops' meeting. U.S. church leaders debate the need for a Eucharistic teaching document. Summit results. An arms control expert tells us what could come from President Joe Biden's meeting with his Russian counterpart. And back in court. A Christian baker already won his case at the Supreme Court, why he's facing new fines. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 17th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. A big win for religious freedom. In a unanimous decision today, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Catholic Social Services in its case against the city of Philadelphia. Justices voted 9-0 in favor of Catholic Social Services. The case, Fulton versus the city of Philadelphia, dates back from 2018. Philadelphia stopped working with Catholic Social Services because it would not certify same-sex couples as foster parents. The justices said the city violated the Catholic group's free exercise clause of the First Amendment. Catholic and religious freedom advocates are praising the decision. Joining us now to talk more about this is Andrea Picciotti-Bayer, director of the Conscious Project. Andrea, welcome back. Always so great to see you. I know that you've been closely involved in this case. What was your reaction when you heard the news, and did you expect this ruling?
You know, my reaction was profound elation. This is an incredible victory for religious freedom, as you mentioned, and for children in need and the people who want to respond to their needs. It was not surprising that it was a victory, but it was surprising that it was unanimous. The Supreme Court has often been divided on these important issues, but all 9 justices agreed that what the city had done was a violation of the free exercise rights of the Catholic agency. So it's a really wonderful victory, a banner day for religious freedom.
And for those who may not have been following this case, can you give us a quick background and explain to us how it got to the High Court and why Catholic Social Services said its religious freedom was violated?
Absolutely. It's been a long 3 years, but as you mentioned before, in 2018, city officials asked or demanded that the Catholic agency certify same-sex married couples as foster parents. Now, the agency said that they couldn't do so because it was inconsistent with Catholic teaching on the nature of traditional marriage between a man and a woman. They offered an accommodation that they would refer any same-sex couple that came to them to one of the other 29 agencies working with the city, but the city wouldn't budge. Now, it's important to note, Tracy, that no same-sex couple ever approached the Catholic agency, and the Catholic agency never advocated that same-sex couples would be prevented from fostering. They just wanted to be able to work within the Catholic teaching on family and the nature of marriage. So it's gone its way through our court system. It's gone its way through our court system, and
I'm sorry, continue.
And no, it's gone its way through our court system, and wonderfully, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote a very clear and concise opinion that if the city was offering exemptions for a range of different reasons, then it needed to offer an exemption for the Catholic agency to be able to operate consistent with its beliefs.
And can you talk to us about the significance of this ruling and the impact that it could have on religious freedom?
Yes, Tracy, it has huge significance in Philadelphia. I was involved in filing amicus briefs in the Court of Appeals and with the Supreme Court, relating the stories of former foster care children and foster and adopted parents, both in Philadelphia and across the country, people who have said that it was their partnership with Catholic-run agencies that made the difference and made their foster experience a success. Now, that's going to spill over to other agencies that are also trying to remain true to the teachings of the faith, and other organizations that are faith-inspired, to be able to say, we want to serve the needy in our midst and in our communities, and we want to do so consistent with our religious beliefs.
Well, Andrea, we have about a minute left. Before I let you go, though, what comes next, and are there any other cases that you're keeping your eye on?
Well, there is a number of commentary among the concurring justices in the Fulton case about looking at some court precedent, in particular a decision that was handed down in 1990. That may be the next big religious case to come. The court is coming to the end of its term, and there are a couple interesting cases that are going to come out dealing with donor disclosure laws in California that could also impact religious groups and people who want to make donations to traditional religious teaching. And so I think right now what we can see, having kind of pulled back the last few years, the Supreme Court has never been more pro-religion, and that's because it's very truthful and consistent with the guarantees of the Constitution.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time today and for your analysis. We always appreciate it. Andrea Picciotti-Bayer, Director of the Conscious Project. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tracy.
In Denver, the legal challenges continue for Jack Phillips and the Masterpiece Cake Shop. A judge has ruled the Christian baker violated Colorado's anti-discrimination laws by declining to make a birthday cake for a gender transition. Alliance Defending Freedom will appeal the decision and the $500 fine. The U.S. Supreme Court previously sided with ADF and Phillips in a similar case. Well, today is the second day of the USCCB's spring meeting. A debate and vote to draft a document on the Eucharist is a priority, but the nation's bishops also have other agenda items. The National Review Board's chair, Susan Healy, addressed compliance with the 2002 Charter for Protection of Children and Young People. The bishops approved canonization processes for 2 servants of God, and they are weighing approval for a statement on ministry to Native Americans and new translations of liturgical text. But the main focus is on the Eucharist and its role in the church today. Joining us now for analysis is Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief for EWTN News. Dr. Bunson, welcome back. Always so great to be with you. So tell us about the meetings today and, in particular, the meaning of the Eucharist in the life of the church.
Well, compared to the fireworks that we saw yesterday at the very start of day one, today, to use a term that is often embraced by those in the Vatican, it was almost serene in the way that much of the conversation took place. It got a little caustic later in the afternoon once they actually got to the discussion and then the debate over that very document you just referenced on the Eucharist and the life of the Church. But for the most part, it was very businesslike. They moved very swiftly through the agenda. Now we'll see what actually happens with this document. It will be subject to vote. It needs a majority vote to proceed in the creation of a draft. But we'll see. One of the other really striking things about this today was that Bishop Kevin Rhodes, the chairman of the USCCB Doctrine Committee, who is sort of the shepherd of this whole process, had an opportunity to spell out, not just for the bishops, but for everyone, what's really in this document. And I think it was a very clarifying moment both for the bishops and for a lot of Catholics.
Yeah, Matthew, how do you see this all playing out?
Well, we'll know tomorrow in terms of the vote, and I think it is very likely that this is a document that's going to be approved by the bishops for a drafting. Now the process begins, and this was part of the debate today, for what sort of amendments, what sort of changes, what exactly this final document is going to look like. All eyes then are going to move to the work of the committee and its consultations with a variety of other committees, part of the USCCB, and consultation with individual bishops and experts. I think we can anticipate the likelihood of some kind of a draft at the November meeting of the bishops, where presumably they're all going to be in person. And that's where I think we'll see some additional fireworks once they actually have something in hand.
And what were some of the highlights today, maybe for you, and what can we expect for tomorrow?
Well, the highlights today is, as you listed a few of them, one that really stood out to me was the request for a draft vision document for Native American ministry. I think that's something that historically is going to be very important. I think it is an outreach that is going to be very timely given the many challenges we've had in the past in Native American ministry. We also had the 2 causes that you noticed of Father Verbis Lafleur, a priest, a chaplain who died in 1944, and Marinus LaRue, who was a merchant marine captain who saved 14,000 Korean refugees during the Korean War. Both of them have their causes now progressing, and the bishops clearly recognize that these are two potential modern saints. The other thing to note is the National Review Board report that we got an update on where we are with the clergy sexual abuse scandal, and I think we can safely say in the general sense that we continue to make real progress. Tomorrow, we'll be focusing very much on the Eucharistic revival, which is a kind of document that dovetails perfectly with what the bishops are talking about today with Eucharistic coherence. That is going to be an important moment for this conference as well.
Matthew, thank you so much. We're always so grateful for your analysis. Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief for EWTN News. Thanks again.
Good to be with you.
Reducing the risk of nuclear war. That's one of the items discussed at President Joe Biden and President Vladimir Putin's summit. The two leaders agreed to consider arms control measures. But one day after that summit, is the world any safer from a nuclear holocaust? White House correspondent Owen Jensen asked an expert today. Owen.
Tracy, President Biden and President Putin together released something called the U.S.-Russia Presidential Joint Statement on Strategic Stability. That's a mouthful for sure, but it all boils down to this. They both reaffirm that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought.
These two presidents can launch about 1,600 nuclear weapons within 20 minutes of a launch order.
One day after President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to, quote, lay the groundwork for future arms control and risk reduction measures, we asked Daryl Kimball, an expert on nuclear weapons policy and disarmament at the Arms Control Association, to break it all down. He says the goal is to avoid misconceptions and imbalances in the nuclear forces of each side.
This was a modest step, but it's a necessary step. These discussions have not been going on for the last several years.
So, of course, the critical question in all of this is the world any safer today from nuclear war than it was before President Biden and President Putin sat down at their summit?
I feel a little bit more optimistic than I did before the summit.
Pope Francis himself has said the use of atomic energy for purposes of war is immoral, just as the possessing of nuclear weapons is immoral. And with both sides possessing thousands of weapons of mass destruction ready to go at a moment's notice.
As I understand his teachings, he's also saying that nuclear deterrence is morally wrong because it is essentially the threat of committing mass extinction.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration announces it will use $3.2 billion from the American Rescue Plan to fund COVID-19 antiviral medicines.
It's a whole of government effort aimed at developing the next generation of COVID-19 treatments, as well as preparing us for future threats.
As for the current threats,
but if you are vaccinated, you are protected. But if you are not, the threat of variants is real and growing.
Also, late this afternoon, President Biden signed a law creating a new federal holiday, Juneteenth. It commemorates the ending of slavery in the United States. Now, it's the first new federal holiday since Martin Luther King Jr. Day was created back in 1983. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, U.S.-Russia meeting. Get more reaction to President Joe Biden's high-stakes summit. And free speech under attack. How China supporters are cracking down on journalists in Hong Kong. Well, as we reported earlier, reaction continues to pour in from President Joe Biden's trip to Europe, including his summit yesterday with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Joining us now is Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Tom, welcome back. Always great to see you. First off, your reaction to that meeting yesterday between President Biden and President Putin.
Well, there wasn't a lot that came out of it from a concrete policy perspective, right? Both leaders said that the meeting was constructive. They talked about, talking about more things, but there wasn't necessarily anything that came out of that from a policy perspective that is going to change. But again, the Biden administration really just wanted to try and reset relations and to basically, make sure that not only Putin, but all the other leaders in Europe, knew that this is a change in administration. They're taking a different tack.
Well, Tom, as you know, President Putin denied responsibility for recent cyber attacks on the U.S., while President Biden said during the meeting that he gave Putin a list of 16 critical infrastructure entities, such as water systems, that are off limits to cyber attacks. That comment by President Biden really raised a lot of eyebrows. What do you make of it?
Well, I do think the cyber issue is the biggest issue on the table. Certainly, the ransomware attacks that have happened here in the United States are disturbing. And again, they are attacks on private companies, but they also are attacks on our national security. And so I think Biden was right to raise those issues. But as you saw, Putin came out in his press conference right after having talked to Biden about those issues, denied that Russia had anything to do with it or had any influence over these groups. So that was a little bit disturbing. I'm not sure that Russia got the message and is going to change their behavior. We'll have to find out. But certainly the cyber issue is one that is at the top of the list in terms of American priorities.
Yeah, and another thing that had a lot of people talking were some of the things that President Biden actually said to the press corps, including a very tense exchange with a CNN reporter. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, and also how the press overall covered the president's trip.
Well, obviously, Biden has gotten glowing press coverage since he took office. This trip was no exception, especially if you look at it in terms of how President Trump, his first trip abroad, his first meeting with Vladimir Putin went. So that was, I guess, to be expected. Biden did have this exchange with a CNN reporter at the end. I mean, obviously, he was tired. It was a long trip. But he took his coat off and was sort of wagging his finger in her face. He later apologized for that. But it did raise the question. I mean, if Biden, he took one somewhat difficult, it wasn't even a terribly difficult question from a reporter, and this was his reaction. And so I do think, look, the Biden administration has grown accustomed to getting good press coverage. They certainly received it on this trip, with this one exception. And I think Biden would be well served to not complain about the press coverage as he did before he left from Europe, because thus far it's been pretty positive for him.
Well, Tom, we have about a minute left, but I want to ask you this last question. As you know, the Supreme Court handed down a number of decisions today. And earlier we talked about Fulton versus Philadelphia, but another big case involved Obamacare. In a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Affordable Care Act. Can you talk to us quickly about the significance of this ruling?
Yeah, this is the third time that Obamacare has been before the Supreme Court and survived a challenge. And this one was led by 18 Republican governors that were basically arguing that since Trump's tax cuts zeroed out the tax penalty in Obamacare, that therefore the rest of the case or the rest of the law was unconstitutional. Now, the Supreme Court did not address those issues. All it said was that the plaintiffs, in this case, the governors, had no standing to make their case. And so they really didn't address the core issues of the legality or constitutionality of Obamacare. They just made a ruling on the tax penalty provision of the law. And again, it looks like Obamacare survives yet again and will stand moving forward unless and until there's another challenge before the court.
All right, we will leave it right there. Thank you so much, Tom. Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Up next, religious freedom. Why one cardinal calls it one of Europe's greatest problems. And the role of faith in science. How one event aims to protect the planet. Today, Hong Kong police raided the offices of the pro-democracy Apple Daily newspaper. Police arrested 5 high-level employees under the Beijing-backed national security law. Apple Daily says that it has been left without a voice, and it vows to continue to speak out in favor of democracy. Apple Daily was founded by Catholic businessman Jimmy Lai. He was arrested last year and sentenced to 14 months in prison. A church leader in Europe says that he is worried about religious freedom on the continent. Cardinal Jean-Claude Ulrich says religious freedom will be Europe's great problem of the future, adding church leaders and the faithful must be on guard against it. A group of bishops from Europe earlier had spoken out against the long-term forced closure of churches due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Vatican is hosting an event highlighting the role faith can play in science. The event is being organized by the UK and Italian embassies to the Holy See. Set to take place in October, it will feature numerous faith leaders and scientists. They will discuss a coordinated effort to protect the planet. Joining us now is Sally Axworthy, United Kingdom Ambassador to the Holy See. Ambassador Axworthy, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Tell us about this initiative. Who will be speaking in October?
Okay, so in October, we're inviting nearly 40 faith leaders and 10 scientists to the Vatican to talk about climate change. And this is in advance of COP26, the Climate Change Summit, that will take place in Glasgow in November of this year. So we have partnered up with the Italian Embassy to the Holy See, who are our co-hosts for COP26, and also with the Vatican itself to run this initiative. And we're hoping that the faith leaders will come and they will give a message of encouragement and they will ask political leaders at COP26 to show ambition in tackling climate change.
And can you tell us a little more how religion and faith can work together with science?
So for the last 6 months, we've been running virtual preparatory meetings for the event in October. And we've been hearing from the faith leaders and the scientists their views on the environment. What has been really striking has been how much they agree. So the scientists bring the data on climate change, but the faith leaders really agree with them. They say that, that nature is sacred and that it is our duty to protect the environment. So the two things together, I mean, this is their words, not mine, but they've talked about the facts that science bring, partnering with the passion and the motivational qualities of faith leaders. And we think that these two things together can really make an impact. I mean, as you know, about 84% of the world's population are affiliated to a faith. So if faith leaders motivate their followers to take action on climate change and to ask their governments to be more ambitious, this could really have a significant impact.
I want to switch gears slightly here. We understand that you will be finishing your term as ambassador. I know you spent 4 years at the Vatican. Looking back, what are some of the highlights of your time there?
There have been many highlights of my time here. I mean, I think I've very much enjoyed working here, and in some ways it's been the unexpected things that have been the best things. In 2019, we had the canonization of John Henry Newman. The embassy organised a weekend of events to celebrate, and that was definitely a high point. We had a visit from the Prince of Wales. I've also deeply enjoyed working with the Vatican on the dialogue with Islam. We did a conference quite near the beginning of my time here on Christian and Muslim faith leaders tackling religiously inspired violence together. So that was another high point. But there have been so many, and it's really been on the issues that have come up where the Holy See has something to say, has a voice, and can bring a new perspective to the issues that we're all facing.
And also looking back at your time at the Vatican, what has changed over the years?
So I think one significant change has been the involvement of women in the work of the Vatican. I mean, when I first came here, I was surprised to quite often be in a room that was sort of full of men, which isn't that surprising when you think about it, because most senior positions in the Vatican are held by priests. But I think that has changed over the last 5 years. So the Vatican's been increasingly appointing senior women to positions in the Vatican and involving the religious sisters in the debates and just opening up. So I would say that there's been significant progress on that.
Well, Madam Ambassador, thank you for your time today, and thank you for all of your hard work. God bless you on your next chapter. Sally Axworthy, British Ambassador to the Holy See. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.